It's the King, Nick Gage. Shout out to Murder, Death, Kill Gang, Eastern Bloc. You're watching Wrestling with Regret. If you don't watch that shit, I'm gonna come to your house and I'm gonna do bodily harm to you. It's the guy, Big fucking Gage.
Well folks, the decade is almost over. 10 years of wrestling, come and gone. I know a lot of you have asked me to do some kind of decade retrospective, but honestly I feel there have been enough insane moments in this year alone, both good and bad, to rival the other 9 years before it. As is tradition on this channel, it's time for me to count down the worst and best of the year, but this time I'm doing something a little bit different. See, instead of focusing on just WWE, I'm going to look at the worst and best of all of wrestling this year, which in the case of this week's video is mostly WWE. Let's begin. Number 8, the end of Kofi Kingston's title run. Sometimes you just gotta bitch about booking. Okay, so most of us can agree that Kofi Kingston winning the WWE title at WrestleMania was cool, right? Seeing someone who toiled the mid-card for more than a decade finally getting his big shot at the top of the mountain, it was such a great moment. But then after he won it, the fear began to set in, like, oh crap, he's gonna be booked like garbage and have this short, boring reign, isn't he? Well, it turns out that was far from the case. He held the belt from April to October and looked really strong against his opponents. He barely ever lost during that time period. That would all change on the Fox premiere of SmackDown, however, when Kofi got destroyed in less than 10 seconds by Brock Lesnar. Not since Kevin Nash powerbombed Bob Backlund in 1994 was a WWE title match that short, but at least back then, Backlund was the heel. So all those months of goodwill and build for Kofi were squandered away in less time than it takes for you to refresh your Twitter feed. And since that match, not only has he not gotten a whiff of the main event picture, they've barely acknowledged the fact he was the champion for the bulk of the year. It's like it never happened. And what was all that nonsense for? For Brock to win another title just to add a little bit of spice to his crown jewel match with Cain Velasquez that was ultimately not needed. And now the title's back to being non-existent on programming. Great job, WWE. Number 7, Crown Jewel Chaos. Speaking of Crown Jewel, I'm not going to beat a dead horse about WWE's propaganda deal with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia like I did last year. It's still bad. But what happened after this year's Crown Jewel event was just the cherry on top. After what I'm sure in the company's eyes was a successful showing in Riyadh, more than 175 wrestlers, crew members, and other employees all got on board a plane headed for the US, only to be stuck on the tarmac for several hours. Eventually, a handful of wrestlers secured their own charter plane home, while the rest had to wait it out until at least the next day. And I thought flying back home after this past Mania weekend was a nightmare. When the news broke, we heard tons of different theories as to why the workers were detained. A spat between Vincent McMahon and Prince Muhammad over money. Outrage over Natalya and Lacey Evans embracing female fans after their match, and God knows what else. In the end, the official word was mechanical failure, but as is human nature, people are always going to question it and claim that it was something more. The fact is, we may never know the real story as to what went down. But the real kicker of it is, while all this confusion and chaos is going on with the talent and staff, the head honcho, Vincent McMahon, had already pieced out on his underlings. The silver lining to all this was, it made that week's SmackDown must-see TV, as the company managed to put out a great episode using the invading NXT stars with what was left of the Blue Show's roster. But the whole debacle was a negative for WWE, which has already been pounded with bad press over their relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Number 6, Wrestling Twitter, but more specifically, Seth Rollins on Twitter. The internet is truly an amazing invention. By bringing people together from all over the world over common shared interests, it should be able to unite us. But unfortunately, like with almost any fandom, social media in particular has exposed the worst of tribalism in wrestling fans. When the words All Elite Wrestling first entered our consciousness, many fans chose to instantly pick a side, then begin to vehemently defend their company while tearing down the other one. And hey, if you dare say something nice about the other side, you're just a dick-riding fanboy. I'm sorry, but that mentality is completely bonkersville. This sense of us versus them isn't just limited to wrestlers or wrestling companies, but entire subgenres. I'm not proud to admit that I've been caught up in the madness as well while trying to defend comedy wrestling on Twitter, but the difference is I'm advocating for all forms of wrestling to exist. The ones who say that comedy wrestling or whatever other style or company they don't like has no place in the business, well, that's gatekeeping and I don't stand for that. But fan interactions have nothing on what wrestlers have been doing this year. From guys like Ty Dillinger, Luke Harper, and Mike Bennett publicly asking for their releases, to Charlie Caruso taking shots at Dave Meltzer's wife, to Corey Graves being, well, Corey Graves, to Batista shooting his shot at Dana Brooke, and Jordan Miles going scorched earth over what he called a racist t-shirt design, wrestlers have had no chill. And then there's Seth Rollins. While his fiancée Becky Lynch seemed to have a good handle on how to use Twitter, Seth's approach has been received a lot worse. After becoming the new face of the company at WrestleMania, he got into Twitter beefs with guys like Will Ospreay, Dave Meltzer, and CM Punk, while also criticizing the way Dean Ambrose left the company. In doing all this, Seth came off as a big corporate tool. On a medium where it's easy to leave egg on your face, our friend Rollins was wearing a whole damned omelet. But there may be hope for Mr. Architect in all this. At the time of this recording, Rollins seems to be headed toward a full-fledged heel turn on television. But if you ask some fans, he's simply leaning into his online persona, a case of art imitating life. It turns out Seth's new character may not be so new to the world of wrestling Twitter. Number 5. Ring of Honor's rough year. Now, before I say anything, I need to be totally transparent. I've been working with Ring of Honor on a per-appearance basis as a contributor since October of this year, and I've been extremely grateful for the opportunity. I am aware that me putting Ring of Honor on this countdown might get me in some hot water with the company, but looking at the worst of wrestling in 2019, I would be dishonest if I tried to ignore their problems this year. Since running in Madison Square Garden alongside New Japan Pro Wrestling this past April, ROH has been battered with poor reviews, low gates, departing talent, and perhaps most of all, bad PR. From contentious fan interactions, to questions surrounding their concussion protocol and how much they pay their talent, to an ugly separation with their women's champion Kelly Klein. And that issue was brought on by a weeks-long Twitter tirade from former agent Joey Mercury, where he pointed the finger at the company's upper management for ROH's ails. Look, I am not denying that Ring of Honor's had a lot of issues this year. It's been practically unavoidable, and unfortunately it's led to a lot of fans predicting the company's demise. Now, I can't speak for management or other wrestlers in the company, but speaking from my personal experience in that locker room for the last few months, from what I can tell, the mood within Ring of Honor is far better than the perception outside of it. Now, you may call me a shill for saying that, but I am speaking from the heart here. Now, I've shared a lot of wrestling locker rooms for the last 13 years, and I have never seen a roster that seems more united and optimistic about their status and their future than the men and women at ROH. I think what happened to Kelly Klein really sucks, but from what I can see, the locker room is not the dreary nightmare that some depict it as. It's sad that Ring of Honor's been through so much this year. For its impact on wrestling as a whole, it deserves far better. But I truly believe, not as a contributor, but as a fan, this company has what it takes to bounce back. So here's hoping that Ring of Honor can find its footing in the new year, for all of wrestling's sake. Number 4. The Canang. It's an angle that was so nice they did it twice. Well, I'm sure it was nice in their heads at least. For a brief period of time, WWE was running 2 concurrent angles in which the health of a marriage was in question, with the wife taking advantage of their poor husbands. We first saw this happen between Mike Bennett and his wife Maria Kanellis, as the pregnant Maria would berate and embarrass her husband on a weekly basis, saying he was less than a man and that he may not even be the father of her unborn child. We never did get the payoff to this angle, as Mike has asked for his release and both the Canelli are off TV. But that's okay, because we're seeing a very similar angle play out in real time. Back in September, Rusev and Bobby Lashley both returned from their on-air hiatuses, suddenly caught in the middle of a love triangle, as Rusev's wife Lana began having a very public on-air affair with Lashley. Since the angle began, we've seen multiple instances of Rusev being beaten down and humiliated. Arrests, restraining orders, more arrests, Lashley being flattened by a piece of the set, Rusev avoiding arrest for breaking the law, while Lashley and Lana got cut for no reason. Just running the gamut. I'm conflicted about all these storylines regarding marital strife. On the one hand, I think it's an old relic from the Attitude Era that has no place in today's product. On the other hand, the company is swinging for the fences for attention, and based on the hard numbers, this seems to be working. But the problem is, for all the people who are talking about it, have the men and women involved actually looked good in all this? Obviously, I would say no. You know, it's kind of sad, really. Last year, Bobby Lashley and Rusev got their own spots on my Worst of Countdown, and this year they're sharing a space together with some more people thrown in. No real joke there, this stuff's been awful. Number 3. Reset, reset, reset. In wrestling and in life, sometimes the best solution to a problem is to just start fresh. Make a whole new beginning and try and learn from your past mistakes. Well, apparently WWE was very eager to learn all year. But did they? In the final days of 2018, the McMahon family appeared in the ring on Raw to deliver a heartfelt message to their fans, who were at their wits' end from week after week of subpar programming. In their speech, the McMahons issued a sorta kinda apology, promised some new faces, and assured fans that they, in fact, were the authority. It sounded like the dawning of a new era. Well, nothing ever really came of that, but they were able to pull a pretty good WrestleMania out of their ass in spite of themselves. After Mania, though, there was the Superstar Shakeup, a draft but not, in which some performers swap shows like they do every year. So now things can settle down, right? Well, no. Barely 1 month after the shakeup, Mr. McMahon flipped the script yet again with the wild card rule, which allowed a certain number of wrestlers to go from show to show, which seemed to change every week and only served to muddy the waters between brands. But at least got to see Roman Reigns on Raw again. Finally, in October, the draft was held in association with SmackDown's Fox debut, solidifying the red and blue shows once again, which of course has already been compromised a lot thanks to the build for Crown Jewel and Survivor Series. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to wipe the slate clean and start over again creatively. I get why you'd want to do that. But all year long, we are promised change in all these different ways, only for these promises to be disregarded in favor of newer, shinier promises, not just once, but multiple times. And because of all these resets, it feels like nothing's been gained since the beginning of the year to the end. Fans are still bored and tuning out in droves. Kinda makes you wonder what the point of it all was. Number 2. That Hell in a Cell match. Damn it, here we go again. October's Hell in a Cell pay-per-view was headlined by a Universal title match between Seth Rollins and The Fiend Bray Wyatt. It was only Bray's second official match since debuting the character, so it felt a tad premature, but you know, maybe they were really going to strap the rocket to him. Bathed in red light, the match began with Bray looking like an invincible monster in the face of the champion. But the crowd got more restless and agitated with every no-sell until Seth went too far and beat Bray so badly the match was thrown out. That's right, a Hell in a Cell match was stopped by the referee for being too violent. I'm sure Mick Foley would have appreciated that 21 years ago. This match was the perfect storm of bullshit. It was part of a rivalry that had just begun, with a character the company seemed afraid to push too much too soon, but did it anyway, in a setting that made it very hard for fans to see, with a finish that flew in the face of the spirit of the match type they were in. What were they thinking? Bray would go on to win the belt later that month at Crown Jewel, but for his first shot to end in such frustrating fashion really seemed to stunt his momentum. And 2 months later, they didn't even talk about that Cell match anymore, so what was even the point? From a pure drama and storytelling perspective, Rollins' unhinged attack on The Fiend was admittedly some great stuff, but it came at the expense of an angered audience watching a high-profile main event match at a pay-per-view that is now concluded with garbage endings 2 years in a row. And the number 1 worst thing about wrestling in 2019 was the era of misinformation. In any war, the most valuable tool is intelligence, but if this year taught us anything, it's that intelligence may be lacking. When AEW launched, R. Felix Finch predicted on this channel that we were entering an era of misinformation, and it looks like he may have been onto something. Now obviously, rumor and innuendo, as some people call it, it's been around in wrestling forever, but it feels like it's been a whole lot worse this year. In today's internet age, sending and receiving news can happen in an instant, whether it be via tweet, or an Instagram story, or a YouTube video. Sometimes that works out okay, but not so much in wrestling. It seems these days if you want to call yourself a wrestling journalist, all you need is an internet connection and a dangerous reliance on your hunch. As the number of news providers has grown, the focus has shifted from reporting the news to breaking news. That ever-present thirst for clicks and ad revenue, sometimes not doing due diligence on your stories. Apollo Crews is back on TV. Well, he's going to win the Royal Rumble. Oh, cruiserweights are on the main roster shows? Well, 205 Live is definitely getting canceled. Oh, Fox is booking the backstage show on FS1. CM Punk return confirmed. Oh, wait, never mind. That actually did happen. But more than just the hair-trigger reporting of rumors, even the slightest speculation was treated as stories by far too many people in the wrestling news world. We saw it when Baron Corbin was announced as Kurt Angle's final opponent for WrestleMania, when the talent was stuck in Saudi Arabia, when Jon Moxley's contract came up, when Sasha Banks was taken off TV, just a bottomless buffet of misinformation and speculation based in nothing. Combine that with what appears to be an unwritten directive by WWE to discredit certain sources, most notably Dave Meltzer, and signs of planting false narratives to weed out sources, and there's really no direction to reliably turn to in the online space anymore. This chaotic environment's been weaponized, not only in wrestler promos, but to further fuel the never-ending news cycle. What should be a source of information for our favorite form of staged fighting is devolving into another tool to be used to manipulate the masses. And that's why the era of misinformation is the worst thing to happen to wrestling in 2019. So what other crap do we have to put up with this year? Let me know in the comments section below. Bonus points if you can avoid saying Baron Corbin in the main event. Come back next time when I give you my thoughts on the best of wrestling in 2019. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.